welcome to today's episode of Authentic Achievements, where it's my absolute privilege to be joined by the fabulous Niki Avraam. Niki, welcome.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks for having me.
I'm so looking forward to this conversation, and judging by the conversation we've already had in the green room, I think it's going to be a good one. But before we get really stuck in, as we've already proved we can, let me share with the wider audience a little bit more about you. So Niki stands at the forefront of a transformative movement in leadership and workplace evolution. A legal entrepreneur with a rich background in employment and discrimination law, Niki's journey has been distinguished by litigating high-profile cases and founding the London law firm Niki Avraam Solicitors. A compelling keynote speaker on leadership, mindset and future workforce issues, Niki offers a roadmap for reinvigorating professional engagement. Her concept of preferred discomfort encourages embracing growth beyond comfort zones, while her insights on the authenticity trap highlight the importance of versatility in discovering one's true potential as a leader and an innovator. Niki, I love that. And as you know from our chat before, we're clearly aligned on that. You know, I often think we've got to learn to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. So I can't wait to get into that debate. Can you tell me a little bit more and tell our audience a little bit more about your journey so far? What brought you here?
Well, that was a mouthful, so I'll try and summarize it. I refer a lot to my unconventional journey. I gave a keynote talk the other day called Miss Unconventionality, and that's about breaking the conventions of a very rigid industry, which is law. And it doesn't have to be a radical act. I started my career rejecting the job role that was offered to me in commercial law. Very clear, delineated career path. Mum and dad would have been proud, but I turned it down because I saw scope for growth in employment and discrimination law. So I put a business plan on the table and proposed to build a brand new department. There was loads of stuff coming in from Europe, lots of legislation. I thought I could have impact, assert my own identity, but also I wanted to help the firm and its clients grow and thrive. And I was completely invested in what I was doing. I truly felt like I had that personal stake in the success of the firm. And I believe it accelerated my growth and also added immense value to the firm. So a lot of what I talk about now, which is centered around having agency over what we do, it's derived from that initial experience and then going on to build other departments and founding my own firm 10 years ago. But also it's reflecting on my journey as a leader as well, because I was a very top-down leader in the earlier days. So I thought my passion and vision could trickle down to everyone else and they would just, enjoy the ride. I found that approach stifled people. And as soon as I kind of switched, I had this big light bulb. I became more of an enabler, an empowerer. And now I say a big part of being a leader is being a custodian of people's career journey. Yeah. And that's from my experience again, and also being in the bones of businesses, different businesses, fighting those cases, but also looking at how can we prevent those cases from arising, and how can we look at workforce culture and ensure that people are engaged in what they do. That's what leads to the success of organizations and individuals. So fast forward to today, I am obsessed with this single mission, which is very simple, and that's that we fall in love with work, that we are invigorated and inspired by the work that we do. It's our fundamental right, and it's how organizations and individuals thrive. And it's the only way, and that's to have control over the work that we do and how we do it.
Oh, I love that, and it's so true. I think over the years, many organizations that I've worked for me, the kind of key breakthrough moment was when you're able to help your team have permission to be part of the solution, so that they actually get to recognize that they are equal to, as are you equal to, and therefore all part of the solution, and we can start to play to our strengths. We can start to do the bits that make our soul sing. We spend so much of our life working, we may as well enjoy it. We're not going to get not doing it. And I love that your kind of like passion is for creating that environment for more and more organizations, so that you can have a bigger impact on the cultures that are being created in organisations, and therefore the impact that those have on people within them. So what would you say has been the greatest lesson you've learned so far?
I mean, there's lots, but the greatest lesson is the importance, and I love that, looking at work as something that makes sure you're sourcing. We should, it's our right. Yeah. And one of the things that I think facilitates, enables that, is bringing our own selves to work, asserting our identity, and being able to express ourselves as sort of full human beings. We have so much wisdom and learned experiences. I refer to it as bringing our wisdom toolbox to work. So why not? Why not align all of our strengths, passions, and goals with those of the organization? And the ownership culture underpins all of that, all of the pillars I talk about. It's central to asserting our own identity. And there have been times in my journey where I haven't done that. Before, I'm embarrassed to say now, but it's a sign of the times, I was removing my wedding rings at partnership interviews at bigger law firms for partnership positions. I was at a certain age where I thought, well, if I have my wedding ring on, they'll know that I'm married, and then they'll assume that I either have a child or I'm going to have children, and that will then interfere with my commitment to the job. So I used to do things like that and really wear this whole sort of body armor to work, to replicate what I thought a leader should be, and a lawyer: tough, change maker, assertive. When I started my own business 10 years ago, I put that in the bin. I decided to present as a wife, a mother, bring that to work, and really be passionate about the great service we were providing for clients. And now, by sharing all of that experience and showing that vulnerability and being open about that journey, I feel that it inspires others to do the same. And that's why I'm compelled to talk about the importance of asserting our identity at work. I talk about it with students at universities, with managers, leaders, CEOs. At every level, we have the lived experience to bring to work, and those unique experiences is what creates that diversity of thought, which is integral to the success of any organization.
I couldn't agree more, and I'm smiling along because I too know what it was like to wear that armor. And I did cut my teeth in financial services, and thought that my entire wardrobe was black for work, apart from the occasional bit of navy just to mix it up. And you tried to present in a particular way, to be like everybody else. And it was like, but actually that's not who I am, and that's not how I am. And I remember being in an interview at one point and deciding, it's going to be a big job. And actually, if I'm going to do it and do it well, I'm going to have to be me. And so I got to the end of that interview, and they asked, the chief people officer asked me if I could sum myself up in a word, what would it be? And I remember looking at her and saying, loud. And she looked a bit taken aback and went, I'm sorry. And she went, loud. Yes. So you've known me for what, 55 minutes? And she went, yeah. I said, do you think I'm loud? She went, well, yeah. I said, great. In that case, it's self-aware and it's honest. I'll stick with it. And she goes, that got you the job, because it was the first time in 19 years somebody hadn't gone, I'm motivational, I'm driven, I'm this. She said, you actually played something that a lot of people would see as something that you should be vulnerable about. And I was like, but it's how we share our vulnerability without losing our credibility. And it's a line, isn't it? But bringing your whole self to work and saying that this is who I am, and my lived experience, actually, as a mum, as a partner, as a friend, has use in the business world, because we chat before the show, didn't we? I mean, children are the fiercest negotiators you're ever going to come across. So as a mum navigating that, you learn great skills, don't you, to be able to take back into that purpose-driven work that you're trying to create.
Yeah. I mean, bringing our whole selves to work In some ways, it's an overused expression that we hear a lot. It doesn't mean sitting at your desk and crying every time you're having a blue moment, or you're having a bad morning. You know, you've been rushing to take the kids to school or something. It just means asserting your own personality and bringing your character into work. And there are so many. Even if you like the business case for that, we shouldn't have to separate it as such. But even just looking at that. You know, we often think, okay, we have to, if we're presented with a job role, for example, in the past, there's been that temptation to say to everyone, you have to mold yourselves around that role. Yeah. As a young lawyer, if I'd followed that precedent, I would have been sitting in a back room, drafting contracts, and perhaps I'd be willed out a few years later to meet people. But I had an entrepreneurial upbringing and spirit that I wanted to bring into the legal industry, which wasn't the done thing, but I had mentors that would collaborate with me on that. And that was really aligning my goals and my strengths with the job role. I wasn't just a lawyer. I was also a business developer. I was doing seminars. I was speaking from an early stage in my career. That was not the done thing. And that's why I encourage from university level upwards, even if you haven't been into the working world before, go in there and look at what your lived experiences have taught you and what you can bring to work to facilitate the role, to add to it, put your own stamp on it. That's how people feel that they have a personal stake in the success and the well-being of any organization, to assert your own leadership philosophy, even if you haven't got all the fancy titles that, you know, give you that rank and file.
Oh, I love that. But it's true, isn't it? We build that by the fact that, you know, in every day, in every interaction, we are leaving a legacy, whether we like it or not, we are. But you're advocating for actually owning that legacy, making sure that you are conscious about what that is, and that you've given it the forethought to say, actually, what's important to me? What are my values? What do I want to do? And how does that align with the organization? And how, therefore, collectively, can we both be stronger? Can we both thrive as a result of that commonality, but also that being able to turn the volume up on your unique skills, your unique lived experience, your unique strengths that will augment where that organization's going. But that can sometimes be a hard thing to do. So, and I imagine it wasn't easy turning down the original job offers and going, I'm not going to take the traditional path that everybody else has taken. I'm going to forge a new path because that doesn't work for me. I you came up with a number of obstacles along the way. Could you tell us about how do you mentally overcome those to enable you to physically take those steps?
Yeah, I'll just try and single out a couple of obstacles because there were many. But at that time, imagine the structure, and it's still the case now, structure of a lawyer in a law firm. You go in, you're a newly qualified, then you become an associate, then you become senior, then you become a partner. Your remuneration is driven by that. Now, what happens when you try and break that mold and you bring in business, which takes some time, and it's not just fee earning work? It meant that not all my colleagues were comfortable with that. In fact, that they were more than uncomfortable. You know, I had a reaction that where I could see that they weren't happy. They weren't happy that I had that autonomy. They didn't really know where I fit. It was things like having to fight my way onto business development functions. At one time, and I can't believe I say this, I'm not that old, there were male-only business development functions. And who was going to those? CEO of this and that company. They were the ones that would give us the business. And my argument there as a young lawyer, which wasn't easy, was to say, I should be there because they all have workforce challenges. They're not only, you know, it's not just mergers and acquisitions. They're not just buying companies or real estate. They have a workforce and therefore they need an employment lawyer, or they might need one. And so in doing that, I was able to present that business case, but also very aware that I was a woman going in, and and I always looked at my job as, how can I have a wider impact in the world? And part of that was, I want to pave the way for other women to go. That's just not right or fair. It's frankly discriminatory. Those are some of the obstacles. I didn't raise grievances about any of this, but it was things that it made it difficult in a way. But I was so driven by this overall mission. I was so invested that I could go forwards. I mean, my mentors did collaborate with me, but all of that package meant that I could overcome those obstacles because I had this wider picture. I think it's very important for people to look at how can you reframe your job, as in, what's the job that I'm doing? Look at the granular tasks. What can I add to it? But what is the wider impact that I'm having? And I think it's incumbent on organizations to refresh on all of those things, not just in the crafting of the role, but the reframing of it. All of that really, it was so important in my development and how I moved forward. And I have practiced that and seen the difference that makes to people. That's how you motivate people, and that's how you engage them. And that's, the big challenge we're facing at the moment is one of apathy and disengagement, I believe, in the way we work.
I mean, it's so true. We are struggling from that disengagement and that. And how do we re-engage people that have become disengaged? But I love that actually what you're sharing with people is that they can actually be part of that solution. So they can take some control and they can start to look at it and go, here's how I think I can make a bigger difference. That's going to have a bigger difference for me too, because I'm going to feel more value with that and than I did before. And you've also mentioned a couple of times throughout this conversation about mentors. And I wondered, how important do you think it is to find good mentors that are going to help you to achieve your vision?
I think it's important, even if those mentors are outside of your immediate working environment. If I look at the people that, reading Simon Sinek's book, I know it's a bit old now, he wrote it, I think it was back in 2010, Start With Why. That was groundbreaking for me, because it really put a voice to everything that I believed. And I'm not saying find someone that's like Simon Sinek and go and knock on his door, but having mentors who understand where you want to go, your vision, is important. But also the culture that's really that organizations can cultivate, and not just manufacturing mentors in that way, but really putting a structure in place so that people have those, whether it be generational or not, those relationships. At Airbnb, I read the other day that I think they label it as a mentern program, where older people, younger people, less experienced people with more lived wisdom, they come together and they learn from each other. And that's an actual structure that's been put in place. It's not just about getting lessons on AI and technology from the younger workforce. It's about taking all the valuable gold dust from people and using that to add to people's journeys. But I think having any type of mentorship or that culture where it's a have your back versus watch your back environment is so important to people's progression. And that's what leads to people feeling that they can work outside of their comfort zones and take risks and innovate. That's how organizations and individuals grow. It's if they feel safe to do that. And again, it is the responsibility of organizations to create those environments.
I love that. It's so true. I think if we create the right environment for people, then to your point, you give them a safe space where it's okay to grow, because part of growing sometimes means failing, but it's about being able to fail safe. I learned from that, and then what did I do differently with it? And the whole all learning from each other. My grandparents shared two great pieces of advice, which I think for me pretty much sums up life. So my nan said, make every day a school day. So in every day, learn something. And if you're open-minded to that and you're curious, you can learn something in every interaction. And my granddad said, don't put off till tomorrow live each, sorry, he didn't. He said, live each day and one day you'll be right. And I think what he meant by that was don't put off till tomorrow something you can do today, because tomorrow's not promised. And I think between the two, they kind of pretty much summed it up. But I think that, how do we become more curious about each other, more curious about technology, more curious about what's coming next? Because I think if we can create a culture of curiosity, and then augment it with the right infrastructure and the right culture where people can grow and develop and learn, that's where you start to see the real innovation of organizations, isn't it? And I think you've had some great examples of that. I wondered if you could share sort of some of your leadership lessons on how can you really take that and make a massive impact in an organization.
Well, there are so many that, and a lot of them are derived from life. And it was when I applied those to work, I want to embody that. I've written a series, and I continue to write it. It's called Leadership Lessons for Success. And the first one I wrote was called Leadership Lessons from a Greek Cypriot Kitchen. And that story is really about applying the principles of hospitality to work and leadership. That was so inbuilt. We always had people around our house. Sundays was a big deal for us. We wanted to present the best version of our home. And having that mentality teamed with very entrepreneurial parents who had everything from a fish and chip shop to a hairdressing salon to a dry cleaners, it meant that I knew from day one how to hold a client's hand. I understood it instinctively, immediately. And that put me head and shoulders above some other lawyers who perhaps had more technical ability at the beginning, but I knew how to look after the client. I knew how to translate all of the difficult legal words and the Latin, and really to feel their journey with them. And that's really what a client wants and needs. You're not just an officer of the court as a lawyer. And I was so passionate about that. And that was one of the founding principles when we started our firm, that put the client at the center. And really that piece, Leadership Lessons from a Greek Cypriot Kitchen, which I gave a talk on the other day, I've expanded that to say, this is about applying your life lessons to work and leadership. What is it? What have you got in your background? Were you in charge of organizing the family parties? What happened to you growing up that you can really bring to work that sets you apart from everyone else? If we look at some of the stereotypical assumptions of different professions, like a coder, for instance, right? Yeah. You bring a coder to the fore who's got great communication skills. Oh, that's brilliant. Team those two things together. Or an entrepreneurial accountant. These are things that you wouldn't often put together. An entrepreneurial lawyer. That's what helped me. What can you bring? Because there are a million lawyers out there, and coders and entrepreneurs. What can you bring that makes that special? And how do organizations create environments where that is recognized and used? Otherwise, you are missing out on people's different perspectives and the way that they can help transform an organization when it needs it most.
I love that. It reminds me of something Stephen Bartlett said in I can't remember which of his books, but where he was talking about the need for what he called stacked skill sets, where not just looking at, like, you might not be the best in the world technically as a lawyer, but you're good. So, you're in the top percent, but actually what are the adjacent skills that might not normally be seen as needed in there, like being entrepreneurial of spirit, being able to have really good emotional intelligence and connect with people, that says, well, actually, I got this plus this plus this. And the sum of those make me the best, because actually those other people are going to go in that one part. So it's recognizing that actually we are the sum of all of our parts and those elements. I love that you've got lessons from the kitchen. I always say one of my greatest leadership lessons came from being a hairdresser. So I first started out as a hairdresser, and they taught you to listen, to really understand what the other person wants, help them to try and achieve it, and to have them leave you feeling the best version of themselves. And so if you can do that for every client, whatever I ended up in financial services, but wherever they are, then actually you'll be a good leader. If you can do that for your people, help them feel better and achieve what they wanted to achieve, and feel listened to. And I think you know, you've already shared such amazing stories about how you create that connectivity, whether that's for your team, whether that's for your clients, whether that's within a wider organization. But how would you say, what would you say has been your biggest challenge that you faced during this transition of moving from those traditional spaces to now establishing your practice, to now actually being that thought leader, going out and sharing that lived experience, owning your story, sharing with other people so they can learn from it? What's been the biggest challenge?
The legal industry is what I'd call a heavy one, and it has a big stamp, a big label. I found it incredibly difficult to extract myself from the ultimate, that controlling method of leading, and to step back and to really take a more strategic position, so I could really turn all of my attention to this mission of making everyone fall in love with their work and building a program around it and talking about it. That really meant I was tested in terms of working outside of my comfort zone. I have been in my preferred discomfort, the intentional pursuit of working outside of our comfort zones, more than ever in this transition. Because when someone asks me, what do you do at a party or wherever, I don't say any longer, lawyer. Boom, that gives you immediate gravitas. You've got a real job, you're grown up. I don't say that anymore. I kind of harp on about my mission, and whatever I do, it has to facilitate that, whether I'm speaking, writing, building programs, doing masterclasses, it facilitates my mission, and that's all I care about. I say, as part of my background, I'm an employment and discrimination lawyer by trade, and this is my journey. That's why I talk about this stuff. But my biggest learning is stepping back from that and being comfortable with it. That's taken an awfully long time. It hasn't happened overnight. And any transition, I think, has to be that journey. It's very rare that you're in the shower one day and you have an instant idea about what you want to do next. You have to get out there and practice and do and talk to people in order to figure it out. I really must have sounded like a crazy person when I started to go to events. Not as a lawyer, I had a different outfit on and I was talking about other things I was doing. I think I was just, talking and talking, and I don't think people actually got what I was about, what I was doing. I needed to go through that process. And now I'm so bold, and it's not finished product, right? I'm still uncomfortable. I do things outside of my comfort zone almost every day. But I'm so comfortable with the mission and so bold about how I'm going to do it, what I want to do, that I'm more comfortable growing out of that heavy lawyer label. And I think it's important for people not to feel shackled by those labels, and to look more at life as different missions maybe. I have found that incredibly helpful. It's helped my whole identity. And I also think it's relevant to the future of work, how we move forward, because there is less need for that really in-depth, linear approach to a job or to professional development. I think we do need to be more multifaceted and dynamic moving forward. There will be, and there is, more pivoting between roles and even industries. And I talk about that a lot. I think actually some of the younger generation are a lot better at understanding and appreciating that.
Oh, I love that. And it is so true. I think there is more movement. I remember when I first moved, and I've moved through numerous industries now, but the first one, you were like, oh, you can't do that now, because you're supposed to be an industry expert. That's your second label to add to your first one, which is whatever it is that you do. And then we create them until the bit that's coming through, loud and clear for me, though, is it's about having real clarity on your mission, on your purpose, on what you want to achieve and why you want to achieve that. Because very often, in the work that I do, what I find is people are really good at knowing what they don't want, but they haven't done it, which is, okay, so what do you want? I've got a big list of things you don't want, but what do you really want, and how do you get excited and ignited by that? And then that gives you, to use your term, the boldness to actually go into the uncomfortable zone, go into that, or to use your term, that preferred discomfort, to give yourself that permission to take that next step, because you what you're doing it for is much greater than whatever the fear is that you're feeling. Would that be fair?
Yes, yes. And you have presented another I word, because I talk about being invigorated, inspired. Ignited is perhaps the best one, because that makes me feel like fire inside of you, lighting you up.
And to be fair, that was the word that I got from what you were saying. You can see when you talk about it that it ignites you. You can see it lights you up. And I think for me, that's what we're all here to do, is find the thing that ignites us, that lights us up, that allows us to then take our passion and our energy and leave a positive impact on the world around us. And I think once you find that, once you see that light in somebody, that they're going to be successful. They're going to drive through, because you can't dim that light once you've found it. And I think for me that it was so obvious in our conversation and in everything you do and say, that you are ignited by this passion, and that's going to be what drives that boldness and that impact.
Too right. And I think we deserve to have that. We all deserve to have that.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Niki, I could chat to you all day, but I'm really conscious of time. Before we end up, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Can I ask you, the one thing I ask everybody before we go is, if you could go back and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be?
I'm going to have to repeat myself in some ways, but it is being committed to your identity, bringing it to work. And alongside that comes the age-old trust your instincts, and being really aware of what your core values are. Now, I've always felt those core values. I didn't always align what I was doing with them. And even including people that I was going into business with. If their core values, and some of mine are integrity, honesty, I'm not that like the beacon of truth, but they are important to me. If you go into business, or if you're doing something and that doesn't align with your core values, then it gives you all sorts of pain. And I experienced that pain. I had sleepless nights because of that. If you're aware of your core values, you can be flexible and agile, because you know what your core values are. So all the rest is malleable.
Yeah.
You can change, you can go forward, as long as you stick to those core values. And that is partly trusting your instinct and having the confidence to do that. I didn't always, as in my younger, less experienced days.
I love that. That's really great advice. And I think we do sometimes dismiss our instinct, don't we? We kind of, because immediately we've had the gut instinct, then our thinking brain will come in and give us all the naysaying things of why we shouldn't do those things. But once we know what's important to us, we understand our values, and therefore we can understand whether or not these things fit. It does make life so much easier. Thank you for sharing such great advice. Before we go, Niki, how can people get in touch with you, and who do you help?
I help individuals and organizations help individuals to understand their leadership philosophy, so that they can ignite, enable teams to thrive and innovate. And that's really underpinned by those pillars around the ownership culture. It's really about addressing that disengagement and being invigorated by work, falling in love with work again. So I help both individuals and organizations to do that. My main platforms are Instagram and LinkedIn. There are not too many Niki Avrams, Niki spelled with 1K. So it's pretty easy to find me, and everything you need to know is on my website. It's nikiavraam.com.
Amazing, Niki. Thank you so much. And for everybody listening and watching, all of the contact details for how you can connect with Niki are in the show notes below. But I'd just like to say thank you so very much for coming and sharing your lived experience with us and such insight. It's been an absolute joy, Niki. Thank you.
What an amazing show. Thank you, Kim. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I hope everybody listening and watching has found it as inspiring and engaging and igniting as I have. And until next time, take care.